All right, folks. We're having folks join us for the conference today. And so thanks for all of you that are taking time to do that. Today's webinar will be talking about the two new HRAs, and we'll also go through some updates on HSAs as well as HRAs, just kind of some background on that. So we'll get started with that. Why are we doing this webinar? We've done a few others. Most of those had to do with self-insurance. And this one we wanted to do because we attend a conference every year in Seattle. It's held mostly in Seattle, and it's put on by a bunch of benefits attorneys who are who track this, and they put on conferences. They have written material that we follow, and they're really, really good at breaking down kind of the new things that are happening out there. And so we returned from that. That was July, Tori? Was that
yeah, July 16th.
July 16th. So anyway, that week we were up there, and so we wanted to be able to share. We always get really good information from that, and we wanted to be able to share that. And so that's the reason for the webinar. As you all may know, we have, there are two new HRAs. We're going to go through that. But start off first by talking about HSAs and HRAs in general, and then get into some specifics. So who's here today? It's Garth Rouse. I'm here. And then with me is Victoria Jones. Tori is, we call her Tori for short. Tori manages the health and welfare side of our business. And so she attended the conference with me, and we'll have some input as we go along. So first question, Tori, how'd you like Seattle?
Well, it was beautiful weather, so I was excited about that. And we were right on the waterfront, which is always nice. So yeah, it was a great time. We got to eat some great food.
Yeah. Yep. Always good time to head up there in the summer. And we had pretty good weather, a little bit of clouds and overall, but yeah, it was good. So good time. I think the next time one of these times when I get up there, I got to tour underground Seattle. I haven't ever done that yet. I like history, and I know there's an underground tour there. I haven't done that yet, but one of these times, I think when I get there, I will take some time and do that. So a couple of things as we get into this. One, there is an hour of CE that was approved for this course. So after the webinar, Matson, who helps us with our marketing efforts here, will be reaching out to those who attended the conference to see if they're interested in getting the credit. And if you are, there will be information that you'll need to get them your NPN number, that type of thing. So there's that. Also, if you have any questions that kind of pop up as we go through today, you'll notice if you go through the bottom of the screen, click down the bottom, you will see a place where there's a chat room where you can talk to just us or to the group. And so if you want to ask questions, feel free to ask them. We're going to try to get into them as best we can. There's really a lot of stuff to cover here. Again, just letting you know that there's that. If you want to ask something privately from us and just want to email that, then you've got our email address there, info@profben.com, that you can use as well. So let's go ahead and get into this thing, and we'll get through our slides. There's not a ton of them, but again, there's a lot of good information here. So hopefully this is information that will help you all out. All right, first, HSAs. Why do we focus? Why did they talk more about HSAs? As you may or may not know, HSAs continue to grow. They continue to be a benefit that lots of employers want to have. And there's an interesting kind of a thing that's happening with HSAs today. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but just the touch on it. As many of you may know, we deal with retirement plans as well as on the health and welfare side, the cafeteria, HRA, HSA, COBRA, self-insured side. And what we've found is that more and more folks who would be traditionally on the retirement end, the investment side, are getting into HSAs. So we're having more of those investment companies coming to us with an HSA product. And why are they linking those together? It kind of makes sense. You know, the concerns that people would have, of course, in retirement or for the assets they need to be able to retire, but also to be able to help pay for medical expenses in retirement. And so we're seeing the investment companies coming out with products for HSA, so that as you talk about 401ks or deferring dollars, putting money away, there's really two buckets that you could put that into. One, one for the retirement side and the other for to be able to pay for these medical expenses with these non-tax dollars. So they're kind of lumping them together. We'll get into that a little bit more. But HSAs, of course, are growing in popularity. They're a popular program, and so some time was devoted at this conference to them. As you all know, or may not know, Code Section 223 describes HSAs and how they work. You know that the HSAs have to have a certain deductible minimum threshold that they have to hit, and maximum out-of-pocket expenses. So an HSA is a particular kind of a thing. It's a particular kind of a medical plan. I'm old enough, and this is, I guess, part of being in business for 30 years, you get to see everything that happens out there, and I've lived through this, and I remember when MSAs, medical savings accounts, were first here, and then HSAs came around. My memory is not as good as it used to be, but I believe it was in the early 2000s that HSAs came into being, and then and so I was there at the beginning, and really knew the concept behind the HSA. So from the legislative end, the concept behind the HSA was if you buy a higher deductible medical program, then you were able to set aside money, premium savings, by buying a higher deductible plan instead of a lower deductible plan. You were able to take those premium savings and put them into an HSA account, which would allow you then to pay for out-of-pocket medical expenses and those type of things that would come up. All of it, of course, being a non-tax. You put the money in, it's non-taxed or taxed for non-tax, and then as you take the money out, it's all tax-free as long as you're using it for those right expenses. So that was the concept. Concept was got to be in a high deductible plan, and so they had to certainly then define what that is. What is a high deductible plan? Today, those limits, they get indexed from time to time. The 2019 minimum deductible has to be, for a single individual, is a minimum deductible is $1,350, and for the family, it's 2 times that, or $2,700. So there is also maximum out-of-pocket limits. The out-of-pocket limits today are $6,750 for the single individual and $13,500 for the family. So again, conceptually, that's what the HSAs are for. And so they're a thing unto themselves. They're really their own specific type of a thing. And for any of you brokers out there that go out and get quotes on HSAs, they're a specific kind of a thing, and they have to be a named HSA because they have to look as Code Section 223 describes. So first thing we're going to talk about, they talked about on the conference, which was interesting, was there are some traps as you take a look at HSAs. And so these are just some things to be aware of. First is deductible traps. Obviously, if the concept is that you have to pay a certain amount of money out of pocket, you have these minimum deductibles, then plans that would allow you to get benefits prior to meeting those can be a trap. So there are medical plans where they have embedded individual deductibles in family coverage that may be lower than the minimum family deductible. You have to watch out for that. There are some plans, although I don't know of any, you'll have to take a look at the contracts that you're dealing with. There are some plans who may have treatment-specific deductibles that are lower than the applicable minimum deductible. So if there's anything like that, you want to be really, really careful about that as it pertains to HSAs. Anything that's mischaracterized preventive care. So the one exception to these high deductible plans in which you have to pay out of pocket is that there is a preventive care can be paid for without regard to meeting those minimums. So make sure that we've got the right preventive care, we've got those things that are allowed, and then also co-payments before deductible can be met is also a no-no with HSA. So make sure you're watching out for those types of things as you look at HSA options for your plans. Discounts, of course, you may or may not know, but there's a lot of prescription drug manufacturers that have discount programs. Just be aware of that as it pertains to these HSA plans. That could throw. I don't have real clear guidance on that, but that could throw a monkey wrench in things. So just be a watch out for that. Also, the other thing they made a point of is saying that there are state insurance mandates that require little to no deductible. So depending on the state that you're in, you have to watch out for the state mandates. And an interesting one they brought up there was a Maryland law. It was passed, I think it was started in 1/1 of 2018, so it was passed in 17. And it was, so in Maryland, they were requiring that male and female contraceptives be provided at little to no cost. And so that can be problematic for HSAs. As a matter of fact, because of that, the agencies came out with IRS Notice 2018-12 that specifically said this type of a thing would not allow, would be prohibitive in an HSA plan. So any plans that allow for that type of coverage right away on that contraceptive thing would not qualify as an HSA. So there's things that you have to worry about there. Next, I guess we're going to talk about, Medicare, VA, and Indian health coverage. Medicare, you may or may not know, but if you're a part of, if you're enrolled in Part A or B, you can no longer contribute to your HSA. So that's, again, you have to have that, what they call high deductible health insurance, high deductible health plan, HDHP. And if you're enrolled in Medicare A and B, you cannot contribute to that. However, of course, if I've got an HSA, so I'm on an HSA plan throughout the years, and I built up dollars into my HSA account, and then I move and get covered under the Part A or B, I can't add anything to it. I can't add any dollars to that. But I am able to continue to have that account balance and use that to offset expenses. So I can still draw from it. I just cannot add to it at that point in time. Indian Health Services, they're an interesting piece there. There's a part where you can participate in HSAs, but there's a rule about 3 months prior coverage. And so I won't go into that for sake of time here, just understand with that. There can be an issue with Indian health coverage. And VA, for some people getting coverage at the VA. What's interesting there is they've got a special kind of carve out on HSA plans that if the condition that that the veteran is getting help for was a condition that was because of their service, so it was a battlefield or some kind of injury that they had while in service, that when you get service for that at a VA, that will not preclude you from HSA participation. So it's an interesting little carve out there for any veterans. I guess the issue with all of this stuff, really, from a practical standpoint for the employer is, how will the employer know that, right? I mean, unless you've got a good way, a good system so that you're checking this stuff, it would be, I think it'd be kind of problematic to make sure that the folks that are participating don't have that additional coverage or those things that could blow up the HSA account. So communication, I think, with participants is key. Communication, letting them know about the program and what's out there and what's available, as well as informing employer of any changes or anything that happens, again, regarding these other coverages would be an issue. Okay, excuse me. So other problematic kind of issues. Preventive care that doesn't meet the IRS definition, you have to watch out, obviously, for that. I've mentioned that already. HRAs are an issue. So HRAs, I tell folks, HRAs and HSAs do not play well together. So there's always an issue. Can an HRA be there? They can. There are limited purpose cafeteria plans. There's other types of programs that you can have, but you really have to be very watchful. It's always a red flag. Right, Tori, in our office, it's always a red flag when we see something like that happen. Telemedicine, telehealth is a big deal that's going on, and again, that's quick access to doctors, which would have an issue with the with HSA and meeting those deductibles, that type of thing. There's on-site clinics, drug coverage, co-payments, direct primary care. All of that type of stuff are issues to kind of watch out for. The gentleman who was the attorney who was doing this talk had an interesting. Do you remember, Tori, the pilots sleep apnea program? Yeah. There was a airline who wanted to provide at no cost a sleep apnea program for pilots, and they had HSA offerings. And so he was able to warn them that no, if you're going to make this available to folks on HSA at little to no cost, that's going to cause a problem for the HSA. Interesting, because I'm sure we all want pilots to get good rest, right? We want to make sure they're all rested up and everything. But again, sometimes, and many of you will know this, and certainly I do over the years in the business, that there's, sometimes employers have the greatest of intent to give benefits to employees and not understand how that interacts with what they're already providing. And so that certainly can be a problem. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is just real quickly, HSA versus QSE, HRA, and ICHRA, ICHRA. First of all, the big general rule that I have with those programs is, or the general thing that I want to make sure all employers understand about the program, HSA is an employee. It's really for those employers that want to either give some money, provide some benefits to their employees, but they don't want to be involved in the process of getting the money out of the HSA. They really want to say, hey, look, this is yours. You go do what you want. You pull the funds out of your account, and they're kind of back out of that part of things. When we have a QSE HRA, which is Qualified Small Employer HRA, or ICHRA, which is one of the new ones, and then EBRA, those are the ICHRA and EBRA, the two new ones. Then now they're really involved. Now there's going to be some administration. There's going to be some documentation they need to require and that type of thing. So HSAs are a little bit more for those folks that want to be out. The HRAs are for employers that really are going to be a part of administrating the plan or seeing the plan administrated correctly. So that's kind of the difference between those. Of course, the other glaring difference is HSAs can be funded through both employer and employee contributions, and HRAs, right? All HRAs are funded with employer contributions.
Right. That's a big difference.
That is a big difference for employers when they're looking at that. So those are kind of the differences there. Just real quickly, and we'll go into more of that. Again, we'll get into those ICHRAs and EBRAs into some greater detail here fairly soon. First off, there is an issue with HSA and ERISA. Is an HSA plan subject to ERISA? Well, certainly the medical plan, if I've got a group HSA plan, that is going to be covered by ERISA. Whether the HSA investment account is covered by ERISA really depends on a few things. And so, first of all, we always want to get folks to avoid ERISA if at all possible, right? ERISA, retirement income security, Employee Retirement Income Security Act, sorry, that came around, I believe, in '74, and of course, there's a lot of requirements that come along with ERISA, and so there's reporting requirements that the government has for plans covered by ERISA. There's notification requirements. There's just a lot of different things that happen with it, and it's best avoided if at all possible. So how do you avoid ERISA, particularly on the investment side? Well, they've given us some kind of areas where we can do that. So one is if the plan's completely voluntary. So what does that mean? Well, it means the plan's completely voluntary. An employer does not require an employer to put dollars in. Does that mean the employer can't have anything to do with the plan? Well, no. Employer can establish an HSA. They can find an HSA vendor. Employer can make contributions, right? If they want to make contributions in. Employer can pay HSA fees, and they can offer a cafeteria plan, other ways to be able to get dollars into that HSA. As you know, with a premium-only cafeteria plan with an HSA feature, allows employees to be able to defer dollars pre-tax out of their pay and go to that. So that certainly can be facilitated, and they can do all of those kind of things without violating the voluntary type of a thing. So there's that. Employer cannot impose post-contribution limits on HSA funds. So what does that mean? That means that employees have to be free to be able to move their funds to other HSAs if they want. They get to basically direct that. Employer cannot restrict how funds will be used. I'm just going to use this for medical expenses or whatever, or we want to limit it to dental or some other type of thing. No, you can use it for any 213D medical expense that you have. So you can't limit or limit your contributions in, or limit what the money can be spent Third thing, a limited ability to influence HSA investments. We'll talk about this in another slide, but again, you really can't choose. They have some guidelines about in choosing an investment company, how many do I have to offer, what process do I have to go through, and we'll talk about that real quickly. And then you want to make sure that whenever you're doing anything verbal, your HR folks and that type of thing, anything is verbal or any documents that go to employees about the HSA plan, you want to make sure that the program says we are not, that ERISA does not apply. And so could I have some documentation wording that says ERISA doesn't apply, but then if I'm influencing how they're going to invest, or I'm telling them that they have to put in so much money, or exert that kind of control, then you're going to have a problem, because even though you say it's not ERISA, you are going to be deemed as being a ERISA plan by virtue of the nature of the control you have over it. So the verbal alone doesn't just do that, verbal and the written communication, but you want to make sure definitely that people understand HR and those kind of folks are not slipping up and you're getting out some communication that says that the plan is subject to ERISA. The only other thing is, I think there are some vendor compensation, whether it's direct or indirect, that employers can have in HSA type of funds. You sign up so many people and you get a gift card or whatever, and you want to be definitely on the watch out for that, because that might make your plan ERISA eligible. So those are, again, just some things to watch out for to help you, if you can at all, avoid ERISA with the HSA plan, with the HSA investment side. Let's talk real quickly about mistakes. So HRA mistakes, you typically have, they've listed them here as 3 categories: the over-contribution, under-contribution, and then administrative errors. So over-contribution, as far as the HSA is concerned, they do have, they do have some remedy for over-contributions. There's no formal correction program like we have on the retirement side. So on the retirement side, if there are issues with the plan, and we know there are issues with the plan, they have a correction procedure that we can go to the government with and say, hey, please forgive us, we're correcting, here's the mistake we found, and then you pay a small fee, and then you kind of go on. They don't have that type of a program really for over-contribution, but there are 2 specialized exceptions which would allow you to get over-contributions back. So one of those is if you've made contributions to an employee who was never ever HSA eligible. That's obviously a mistake. They were never eligible for the plan, shouldn't have got the money, then over-contributions can come back that way. The second one is contributions that exceeded the maximum statutory limit. So again, there are limits as to how much can go into those HSAs, and if you've exceeded that statutory limit, those are the 2 exceptions that allow you to get money back. Otherwise, they're really, that once the money goes into the HSA, it's custodial, it's set away for the participant. It's really tough to be able to get that money back. What about under contributions? Under contributions, they really weren't able to identify a good fix for under contributions. There really isn't a good fix, at least that's been identified by the IRS to under contributions. The worst case scenario would be if I didn't make contributions, and I'm ready to maybe try to get that under contribution off to the participant. But if they're no longer eligible, maybe they're on a plan that is not an HSA plan, that would be that'd be very tough. So again, not real. They're just things to kind of watch out for. Administrative errors. Again, if there's administrative errors, there may be some situations there where you would need to correct. And so I again, without getting into the details, these are things just kind of watch out for. I think the first thing that they identified you'd want to do is identify whose problem is it. Was it a problem from the employer? Did they not withhold what they were supposed to do? Did they not get information out that was supposed to happen? Was it the problem from the employee? Did they fill out the wrong paperwork or put in the wrong information? Or maybe by omission not tell you that they're really not subject to? Maybe they're covered under an HSA plan, but family isn't, and they want to put that family amount in. Or was it a problem with the HSA trustee custodian, and then go back? But these are three of those things that we tend to look at regarding HSA mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So have you seen any of these, Tori? Have any of these come up with any of our groups that you've talked to, that you know of?
Not so much necessarily. I think the biggest mistake with the HRA is potentially the participants not understanding.
You mean HSA?
Yeah.
Yeah, HSA.
HSA.
Yeah, that's right.
Participants not understanding, maybe enrolling accidentally into the FSA instead of the limited purpose FSA, which is dental and vision only.
Yep.
So I think combination of that, or potentially contributing, and then they convert in the new plan year and they would like to have an FSA, and what do they do with that HSA? So I think those are some of the issues that we see more commonly.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. That makes sense. Excuse me. Also understanding how the limits apply and who's covered. I know we had a recent situation with somebody who was covered, but then the spouse got coverage on another plan that was not HSA eligible, and then had to reduce that contribution. There were some issues there. So those things do pop up from time to time.
Yeah, whether you're an individual or family, that makes a difference with contributions if your spouse is enrolled in their employee health plan.
Absolutely. So now we're going to switch gears. So that's out of the HSAs. Just a few things, or a few pieces in there that we thought were relevant to bring up. Let's talk about HRAs. So HRAs, health reimbursement arrangements. We've got two new ones. We'll go through the timing there. HRAs, and I always say this, and I say it probably because it just rhymes and it's easy. I always tell people that when they've got an HRA is a promise to pay. So that's all it is. It's a promise to pay. It's all employer money, and employer promises to pay a certain benefit. And so when employees incur those expenses, they have those expenses coming up, then an HRA promises to reimburse them. So the big plus side for HRAs for employers, from my perspective, always been employer has all the control on an HRA. So they can dictate what you're going to reimburse, when you're going to reimburse it, how you're going to reimburse it. Is there going to be rollover of funds? Is there not going to be rollover? There's a whole bunch of different things with HRAs that make it really nice for employers to control. So HRAs are, when you take a look at the definition of what they are, like an HSA or like any of these plans that we talk about, they are a welfare benefit plan. They provide medical benefits to employees. And so you all know that when the Affordable Care Act came in, it really described what a medical plan ought to be. And so the ACA was all designed about getting people covered. And it did that. It actually, it did that. I don't know if it's affordable, we can debate that, but from the standpoint of the lowest level of uncovered folks in the country, when the ACA came out, that it pretty much achieved that. So there were a lot of folks who got coverage who didn't have it before. Anyway, the guidelines, the ACA was all about getting people covered, and it was all. And so if you're going to be covered, right, then you have to define what is coverage. And so the ACA did that, you have terms now that talk about minimum value coverage and other types of things, but it described what that is. And the problem with HRAs right out of the get-go was it didn't comply with what the ACA said is medical coverage. HRAs, describe, Troy, for us what a client typically reimburses in an HRA through an HRA program.
So the plans that we have after the ACA came out were tied with medical insurance plans that could be like HSA eligible, but they didn't offer an HSA. So they had higher deductibles and higher out-of-pockets, and they wanted to pair that with an HRA so that they could keep insurance premiums down, but still allow the employee to have a similar benefit that they did in the past. Okay. And so that they weren't hurt if they did have those deductible and out-of-pocket expenses. So for example, you have a $3,000 deductible, and then the HRA kicks in, the employee has to pay $500 of that deductible, and then the employer will come back and pay the remaining $2,500. So that's a typical HRA plan right now.
Perfect. And so in what you just described, Again, ACA guidelines where if you're going to cover, you have to cover preventive care at 0%. There's unlimited benefits. There's a few of those things that really fly in the face of what an HRA is. And so, how do HRAs, post ACA comply with all that stuff? Well, here are some exceptions. So you can you can provide only accepted benefits. So there are some things that are called accepted benefits that aren't the true, this is what your medical insurance, it covers everything, it's going to cover all these expenses, cover doctor, hospital, blah, blah, blah. Accepted benefits are limited, and they're kind of a carve out. And so a typical accepted benefit that you might see, accepted benefits are like your supplemental plans or dental. There's a number of different accepted benefits, but they're not the true major medical, and we'll get into detail what that is. You can cover fewer than 2 current participants. That's really a situation where you're looking at a very small group. If you can otherwise qualify for an exception, regulatory exception, and the example is there that they have a thing called a wasting HRA. Again, because of time, I'm not going to get into that. But if you have more questions about wasting HRAs, we can talk about that later. Or you meet the QSE HRA requirements. So QSE HRA is a qualified small employer HRA. I'm sure most of you know about it by now. It's been around. It was a part of the Cures Act that President Obama signed before he left office. So it was December before he left office. And so what the QSE HRA said is, if I'm a small employer, what's a small employer? We're using the definition that we have with the Affordable Care Act, which is less than 50 employees. Then I'm eligible for QSE HRA. So it's only available to small employers. We'll get into a little bit more about some of the stuff with the QSE HRA. But those are things that would allow you to not have to meet the ACA guidelines. The other thing is that the plans must be integrated, and integration requires 4 things. So it must offer a non-accepted group health plan. Basically, all that's saying is, look, if I've got an HRA, but I'm offering it in conjunction with a plan that does meet the requirements of the Affordable Care Act, it's got to cover all those things. Then that's a plan that's going to be integrated and is not going to have a problem. You're not going to have a problem having an HRA. You can have this thing that doesn't have unlimited benefits or pay preventative care at 100%, as long as you're paired with a plan that does those type of things. So, and that makes total sense, right? Only employees of the group health plan may be offered the HRA. That's the other thing. And so again, only those folks who are on the group health plan may be offered the HRA, because again, you need the one plan to meet the requirements of the Affordable Care Act. HRA also has to give the employer the annual right to opt out. Well, why is that? Because employees can potentially get their coverage outside of through an employer situation. They might opt out and get coverage through the exchange, and in those kind of situations, again, the HRA and the exchange might have problems. So you have to give the employees a right to opt out, and an HRA must satisfy at least one of 2 integration methods. And the 2 integration methods are limited reimbursement, which is exactly what Tori just mentioned, which is we're limiting the reimbursement to deductibles only, let's say the second half of a large deductible, or to certain type of expenses, or the minimum value method, and that is, when I say HRA can reimburse expenses without regard to what the non-HRA group health plan does, but it must satisfy the ACA's minimum value standard. And you all know by now, I'm sure, the minimum value standard is that you have to, of those expenses, at least 60% of the plan provides substantial coverage for inpatient hospitalization and physician services. So the issue there is the 60% mark is what you have to hit. Okay, so those are the plans as far as HRAs and how they come into and how they can work post ACA. So let's talk really now about the 2 brand new HRAs. So first off, why do we have new HRAs? Well, how many HRAs does the country need, for crying out loud? So the answer is, why do we have the new one? Because In October of 2017, the new administration, President Trump, issued Executive Order 13813, and he asked the agencies, what are the agencies, IRS, DOL, HHS, to consider proposing regulations or issuing guidance that would increase the usability of HRAs. So he wanted to promote those. Increase the usability of HRAs. He wants to expand employers' ability to offer HRAs to their employees and allow HRAs to be used in conjunction with individual coverage. So that was the order. That's what they were given. So the agencies took that into consideration and they came out with proposed regulations. That happened a year later. So October of 2018, they came out with proposed regulations, and their proposals were what we have here. The ICHRA, which right, we all use acronyms, ICHRA, individual coverage, HRA, and the accepted benefit, HRA, which is EBRA. The regulations also addressed cafeteria plan issues, ERISA, individual coverage, special enrollment, a bunch of other stuff. Public comments were then due, so they put that out there. They wanted public comments back on it by 12/28 of 2018, so right before the end of the year. And so with all that information, with what they've issued, the public comments, they went back and kind of revised and looked things over, and then they finally issued final regulations, and that happened in June of 2019. You all may remember, so that was just a couple of months ago. So this is, again, this stuff is fairly brand new. Likely you've seen some conferences or read material on it, or maybe have attended conferences about it, but this is, again, the information that we got from the folks that we deal with. So proposed regulations were finalized with modifications and clarifications. When do these things apply? They apply for plan years beginning on or after 1/1 of 2020. So not until January of 2020 can we have these types of plans. So let's talk about what they are. So the two again are, I'm going to say ICHRA, individual coverage HRA, and the EBRA, accepted benefit HRA. So back to that term, accepted benefits. So again, which you can just, in my mind, when I think of accepted benefits, it's just a lower benefit thing. It doesn't cover all the things that the others typically do. So it's available. When can you have an ICHRA? It's available when there are no other traditional group health plans offered to a class of employees. And I say offered to a class. With the QSERA, with the Qualified Small Employer HRA, you can't offer that if you've got other coverage. If you've got any other group coverage, then it can't be offered. So what's different right away with the ICHRA is that you can have a group health plan, but if you've got a class of employees that you want to cover with the ICHRA, you're able to do that. So you cannot offer a choice, though, between ICHRA and a group health plan to the same class of employees. So again, that's different than the QSERA. So right away, you would be thinking about employers. Maybe maybe you have clients out there who are looking for, they're offering a group health plan, but they want to do something. They might like to help out or offer somebody to help folks that maybe don't qualify for that. And an ICHRA might be the thing. If what they say is they want to be able to help those employees buy insurance, then an ICHRA might be a thing. Again, that might be a good solution there, because you can't offer it to a class as long as that class is not offered the group health plan.
Yeah, I think that's a big distinguish, because you're a large employer and you've got, like say you own a bunch of restaurants, you've got a lot of part-time employees and hourly versus salary. So the salary are all offered the group health plan, but you also maybe want to help out some of those hourly employees that don't necessarily qualify. So I think this is a big change that we can see, because since the ACA, those employees haven't been able to be offered coverage up until now.
Yeah, perfect. And the other thing is, that's interesting about this, usually we're not on the end talking about adding benefits to employees, right?
Yeah.
We're in a spot where employers really don't want to add additional costs. But the other thing that we have today is we do have low unemployment, and so getting competitive benefits for those other employees may be something that drives employers to set this up, to give them some type of benefit. There's the other thing that's different. So the two things that really stand out to me with the ICHRA as opposed to the QSERA is, one, it's available to any size employer. The QSERA was only for those 50 and under. With an ICHRA, we can do it for any size employee. The other thing is that there's no maximum amount in the ICHRA. The employer can set up whatever they wanted. as far as the amounts are concerned. With the QSERA, there are maximums that you can put in. And it's roughly close to 5,000, 4,950 or 5,000 on the, that's all right, Troy. It's somewhere around there for the individual and then double that for the family. But again, with the ICHRA, there is no maximum. Okay, so that's really it. We'll get, again, into some more stuff here in a minute. EBRA, accepted benefit, HRA, there is a limit that you can put into that, again, up to $1,800 a year. And it can be available to employees for whom a traditional group health plan is offered. So that could work in conjunction with a group health plan. Again, the ICHRA cannot, not to say anybody in that same class that has offered coverage, but in the EBRA you can. And again, both of these, the accepted benefit, the EBRA and the ICHRA, both are available to employers of any size. But you cannot offer both an ICHRA and an EBRA to the same class of employees. Again, part of that is because in one, you do have group coverage with the EBRA, and with the ICHRA you do not. You can't have coverage. So that totally makes sense. Okay, let's see. Both are in the same class. We talked about that. So let's get into the details. What types of coverage can we offer for this? ICHRA, employees and dependents covered by the ICHRA must also be enrolled in individual health insurance coverage or Medicare, so they can be involved in either. So what that allows now is that this allows for an employer to say, I want to provide this coverage to my employees and give it to a certain class of employees. And again, they could use it to buy individual coverage. The other thing they could do is use it to buy their Medicare and Medicare supplements, which is again an interesting kind of a little twist. But it does. You might think of clients that have that, and that's going to become more and more common as we have people staying in the workforce longer. Right, and they hit that 65, and they're working past that if they choose to go on the Medicare, and they choose not to be on the group medical plan, or for whatever reason aren't able to, and then they go onto Medicare. This is a program that can help supplement those premiums. What about the one question I would have asked in all of this, and I'm seeing more of it, maybe you are too, but we have those Christian health sharing arrangements. So I know more people that are doing that because the cost of coverage in the traditional plans are pushing them out, that are going to those type of things. Would those be allowed? Would any of the premium that's paid on those, would those be allowed here in the ICHRA? And the answer is no. You can't have that type of a program. In order to be reimbursed, do I have to buy coverage inside or outside the exchange? To get coverage you have to get coverage inside the exchange if you want a subsidy. Does the ICHRA care? The ICHRA doesn't care. It doesn't matter if it's inside or outside. You can get reimbursed for that individual coverage. Coverage, though, if you're covered under an ICHRA plan, you get reimbursement. That coverage is required for that month. So if I'm going to be reimbursed, $400, whatever the amount is for the month for coverage under an individual plan, then we have to show that there was proof of coverage for that time period. So while this stuff is brand new and we're still figuring things out, and we don't have a lot of stuff regarding notices and that type of thing, there is proof of coverage that must be offered in order for people to get reimbursement. ICHRA must be offered. Now, who can I offer different amounts to different people within a class of employee? And the answer is, it must be offered on the same terms to all employees within the same class, but there are a few exceptions. So one is there's an exception for age and family size. So I may want to, in the same class of employees, I'm going to cover all my salaried employees, or whatever class you're going to use, and I want to pay, I want to give them $300 a month if you're age 20, but if you're age 60, I want to give you $600 a month. Or if you're covering single versus family, can I vary the amounts? The answer is yes. Which is, it makes sense if you're paying for health insurance, right? You and I know that whether I'm covering family or depending on the age bracket that I'm in, those costs vary. So it makes sense that you can, but you can do that. You can vary those amounts. You also can offer employees within a class a choice between an HSA compatible ICHRA or one that is not HSA. So do HSAs work with this ICHRA plan? The answer is yes, they do. Let's see. I think that's about all I wanted to go to as far as that's concerned. Off in the same class, we'll talk about what classes are. Mid-year coverage. Can you be covered in the plan mid-year? Yes. Can I receive the full amount as if I were covered over the whole year, or could I receive just a prorated benefit? The answer is that the employer can decide. They can decide if I want to give an employee the full year of benefit or if I just want to give them the prorated benefit. That, of course, must be determined upfront. It must be the same for everybody in the class, and it must be done, obviously, before the plan year starts.
And just one other thing to note is that the ICHRA does interfere with the premium tax credit or the subsidy. So that's one thing that you want to keep in mind, that you essentially, with the ICHRA, you waive any subsidy that you might get through the exchange.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a good point, Tori. I was just going to get to that. So there are two things. One thing to know. So in QSERA, right, the Qualified Small Employer HRA, if I get my coverage through the exchange, then I'm subject to a subsidy. And so let's suppose that subsidy is $300 and my premium is $500. And so I've got that subsidy. If the QSERA says that I get $100 from my employer, what they're going to do is they're going to reduce that subsidy so that instead of getting $300, I'd only get $200, because that 100 offsets. It would offset my subsidy, but I still get at least part of the subsidy, right? So I'm still able to participate in the QSERA and potentially get the subsidy. The subsidy, again, just it's going to be offset by whatever I get through the QSERA. With the ICHRA, if I'm, as Tori just mentioned, if I'm in and I've got coverage through the exchange, I am out of the subsidy. I get zero subsidy. Doesn't matter what the subsidy is or what I'm getting in my ICHRA. If I'm in that, then you're out of the plan.
Which is why it's important to have that opt-out and the waiver.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly correct. So got to have the opt-outs and waivers for folks, because, again, exactly like Tori said, that subsidy is there. Okay, the other thing is, so permitted classes. Let's talk real quickly about permitted classes. What classes are permitted? What can I do as far as that's concerned? It's the typical kinds of things you would expect for business reasons. So classes can be full-time, part-time, seasonal, salaried, not salaried, geographic reasons to have classes, covered by a collective bargaining agreement, within waiting period for coverage. So there's up to 90 days of waiting period. Non-resident aliens who receive no U.S.-based income. Man, I've never seen that. We've been doing it for 30 years. We have the same kind of thing on the retirement side, the same type of exclusion. I've never seen it. Employers hired for temporary placement or at an unrelated entity, and any combination of those above. Those are all permitted classes. So employer gets to choose permitted classes. What are they going to do for each of those classes? Are we going to offer an ICHRA? Are we not going to offer that? Which ones get offered a group health plan if we're doing that? So those are the classes. The other thing, just quickly to mention about classes, if you're a part of a controlled group, so I'm in a controlled group as I'm an employer and I own 3 companies. I own A, B, and C. And if I set up these classes, does that class have to cross that controlled group line? So again, I'm majority owner in A company, B company, C company. Normally, if I'm dealing with benefits, medical, dental, vision, retirement, whatever, normally in those types of things, I would have to offer the same type of thing across the board. Actually, different employers within a controlled group can have different class rules. So if company A wants to offer a certain amount to salaried employees and company B wants to offer a different amount to salaried employees, you're actually able to do that. So just understand that in controlled groups, if I've got an employer that owns more than one company, where typically in the past they had to have a part of all that stuff, it all had to be the same, know that that's not necessarily the case here. Okay, eligible expenses, we talked about that. Annual notice and reporting requirements. These plans are, the plans that are subject to ERISA certainly do have that. Other requirements, we're getting on 50 minutes now, and I want to get to some other important things, so I'm going to skip by that, this slide real quick. And we're going to try to run through these last ones pretty quickly. So
one thing to
so
add
go ahead.
before we move on is
Uh-huh.
that there are
Yes.
minimum class size requirements. So although
Thank
you
you.
can have different classes, there are requirements depending on size. So
Perfect. Tori, we want to go through this. I'm glad you mentioned that.
mhm.
I totally missed that. So do you want to mention what that is? So class sizes, there are class size requirements. If an employer has less than 100 employees, the minimum class size requirement is 10. If the employer has 100 to 200 employees, then you have to have at least 10% rounded down to the next whole number. You have to have at least 10% in a class. And if you have over 200 employees, then the minimum class size is 20. And so this really when I first saw this, it was like minimum class sizes. I haven't seen that in anything else. And why would you do this? And the answer is the reason that they needed to have minimum class sizes is they didn't want an employer to throw all their sick people in one class of employees and have them get coverage outside and kind of play with your experience that way. So they didn't want to be able to redline a group of employees, put them in a class, and put them out. So anyway, there are, just understand that there are class sizes. Okay, so let's get on. We do have a question, and I'll try to get to that right at the end. So let's get on to the next thing. Group health plan and EBHRA. So they expect accepted benefit HRA. That you do have to offer those together. The annual limits, I think we talked about that, was $1,800 for the annual limit there. It must be made available to everybody, and is it covered by ERISA? It is an ERISA program, and so you need to make sure, again, that as far as documentation and the 5,500 filings, all of that stuff is in play and in there. So I think in finishing up, I want to just kind of finish up. Tori, do you want to go through this last list? What you have on your screen now is a key differences between ICHRAs and QSERAs. Why do we compare those plans? They're both there to help folks pay for individual plans, right? Both of these are there, but they have different requirements. So I would tell you that if you'd like this, we have this as a quick cheat sheet. We'd be glad to send it out to anybody that would like. And so this is just a kind of a quick cheat sheet on the difference between the ICHRAs and QSERAs. And Tori, you want to go through this real quick? Thanks.
So we'll start with the eligible employers. So ICHRAs, you can be an employer of any size, and I think that's really important because prior to after the ACA, that was not available outside of offering a group health plan. There was no other HRA. So I think that's really important to understand. And then the QSERA, again, you have to be a non-applicable large employer, so less than 50 employees to be able to offer that plan. So another key difference is offering a group health plan. With the QSERA, you cannot offer any other group health plans. And the ICHRA, of course, you can. But it has to be based on class. So you can only offer a class the exact same plan. So you can't offer a group health plan to a class and offer the ICHRA. So I think that's an important distinguish. So you have to definitely define what your classes are going to be when you set this plan up. So with the QSERA, even a group health plan providing only accepted benefits disqualifies the employer. So that's important to understand. You can offer a group health plan for former employees, including retirees. So you can still do that. Employer is disqualified if employees can access previously accrued HRA or health FSA. So for example, if they've got a rollover or if you have a sort of HRA that accumulates, essentially maybe you fund an HRA a certain dollar amount every month and you allow for a run out of those funds. So those are things that could potentially disqualify you as the employer. So that's important to understand. So again, with the eligibility ICHRA, you only have to offer it to a class of employees. So that's an important distinguishing. And then the QSE HRA must be offered to all employees on the same terms. So you just need to make sure that everybody who's eligible is offered that QSE HRA. Another important distinguisher is the opt-out. Of course, with the ICHRA, you have to be able to opt out or waive that coverage. With the QSE HRA, you are not able to opt out. There's annual limits on contributions. With the ICHRA, there's no limit as of right now. So the employer has complete control and can set that limit to whatever they would like. And then with the QSE HRA, there are limits. So 5,150 if you're an individual. And if you're on family coverage, it's $10,450. Application of other laws. So ICHRAs are subject to COBRA, ERISA, and other group health plan mandates. So we didn't really talk about tax reporting. It's still unclear as of right now. We for group health plans, we're doing 1094, 1095s. They're estimating that potentially we'll probably be having to do some kind of reporting similar to that. However, they haven't come out with anything definite as of yet. And then the QSE HRAs are not subject to COBRA or to laws to depend on group health plan status. Obligations are not tied to group health plan status. They may apply. So that's obviously different as well. And then again, we just touched on the premium tax credit. I think that's important to understand is, you know, if you do opt into the ICHRA, you are then eliminating any premium tax credit that you may get. So it is kind of important to compare what your benefit may be through your employer to what you might be able to get through the exchange and see what is better for you. And then the QSERA is offset by whatever benefit you get, like Judy had given that specific example. So they're both help employers offer benefits without necessarily offering a group health plan to their employees. So that's important because this is a way for employers to give back if they want to or need to without having to offer a group health plan.
Okay, perfect. So that's the rest of this slide. Again, we've got this slide put together, and so we'd be happy to send that out to you if you'd like. I did got one question that came up that was really very good question, and it was a part that I wanted to go through, and I kind of skipped over because of timing. But the question came in. It says, does this satisfy the ACA employer responsibility to offer coverage that meets the minimum value and affordability standards? And they give a circumstance. The person gave a circumstance. 65 total employees, 10 full-time salary are offered traditional health plan, 34 full-time hourly offered the ICHRA, and 20 part-time that are offered nothing. And so the question is, are they going to meet? Is it right? Because the Affordable Care Act would say, if you're not offering coverage to your employees that meets affordability and minimum value, then there's a penalty that you're going to pay. And so it's a really good question. The answer is this: ALEs, applicable large employers, can avoid the employer shared responsibility penalties by offering an affordable ICHRA to full-time employees. So I think the example that you gave, first of all, these plans, these ICHRAs qualify as MEC, minimum essential coverage. And so in order to get out of the 4980A penalty, that's saying, am I offering coverage to employees? That A penalty, that's the $2,000 index penalty, and I think it's up to $2,700 now. It's the big penalty. That one, by offering this, so that if you're offering it to those full-time employees, yep, you're out of the A penalty because you're offering some type of coverage. So in this case, where I've got 10 full-time salaried, I've got another 35 full-time that are hourly. So that 45 set of employees, if I'm offering them, 10 are offered the traditional plan, so that meets it. The 35 are offered the ICHRA, then the answer is yes, I'm out of that A penalty. So the question is, do I get out of the B penalty? And the answer is, if you're offering an affordable ICHRA to full-time employees. And so you'd have to check into that affordability issue, but remember that there's an affordability thing regarding in the Affordable Care Act. So to be subject to no penalties, I have to have minimum value coverage, which you would under a plan that you purchased through the ICHRA. Most likely you would, but it has to be. I have to offer coverage, and it gets you out of the A penalty. And if I offer coverage that's both minimum value and affordable, then I can get out of the B penalty as well. And so I think there's a potential to be able to do that. But in the example that I got, 10 full-time employees offered a traditional plan, health plan, and 35 full-time hourly offered the ICHRA. 20, the other 20 that are part-time are offered nothing. In that example, if you left a traditional plan to those 10 and you now offered the other 35 this ICHRA, yes, you're out of that A penalty for sure. So B penalty, I think we'd have to know a little bit more and get a little bit more into that, but otherwise, you're definitely out of the A penalty.
And you also have to look for the size requirements, and in this case, they would meet the size requirements for the class.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect, Tori. That's exactly right. So, so good question, and thank you for bringing that up, because this can be a strategy for helping folks get out of the get out of the penalty situation. So, gosh, guys, it is now 11 o'clock here Pacific time. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was helpful to you. If you have any questions or would like the slide presentation, or would like the slides certainly on the key differences, feel free. You will be reached out to. We'll get Matson to reach out to you regarding the CE, and again, so we'll make contact that way. If you'd like anything, please feel free. But thanks again. Enjoy whatever you have left of your summer, and yeah, enjoy the time. And again, thanks for your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alrighty, bye.